All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Leo Brady. I'm the film critic with amovieguy.com. I am so incredibly grateful to be here with director Mark Pellington. We're here to talk about the new director's cut of his film Going All the Way. Mark, thanks for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, well, man, you've got such a fascinating sort of background, a fascinating story. Um, I've been asking a lot of directors and actors and people that I've interviewed about how they sort of got their start with even a love of cinema or making movies. For you, your dad was a all-star linebacker for the Baltimore
Mhm.
Colts. So it starts a little bit with that, but how did you've got your dad playing football on Sundays, and then what are you doing in order to get into movies?
Um, well, he played when I was very young, so he retired, and I grew up in Baltimore. I was really more into music and journalism growing up.
Yeah.
But I remember my mother would go to these double features back then, and you'd see two totally disparate kind of movies. And early on, I saw like Straw Dogs and Network, and I think I saw these movies like well before I was should have really seen them. I was like young.
Yeah.
And those are pretty like dark movies. So I grew up in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
So I was never into like fantasy or that sort of thing. I was into realism. Like I grew up a child of Watergate. So it was like I always preferred psychological realism and All the President's Men and Sidney Lumet movies. But I wouldn't call myself in high school like a cinema fan or anything like that. I was always into music and journalism. I
Yeah.
don't think it was until 1983 when I moved to New York and spent the summer in New York that I was like, and would wander around the village and wander into theaters and see like movies like Liquid Sky or Brother from Another Planet.
Yeah.
Those were the movies that kind of blew my mind. Those were the movies like, wow, these are not the movies that are in the multiplex in Baltimore. Because in Baltimore, there was no art house theaters there. In
Right.
college, where I went to college, there was no cinema there. So it wasn't until I got to New York that I started to like open up my mind to movies.
Yeah.
And then working in MTV, again, music, kind
Right.
of fell into the visual side and got a job there in post production. So it became art and movies and just art galleries and music and movies were part of that kind of appetite for what I was consuming through the 80s in New York. So like
Yeah.
Dave, I remember Blue Velvet being a huge impact on me and being like, wow, like that was a mind blower. I still saw major movies. I would go see, the mainstream movies, and I liked movies as much as anybody else. But I don't think I really started taking it seriously. Again, I was making stuff, music videos and collage, and I was more interested in non-narrative, non-linear kind of storytelling, frankly. And
Yeah.
it wasn't until like kind of the early 90s that that stuff became easy for me to do, doing little 3 minute, 2 minute music video. That stuff, I was like, there was a producer named Ted Hope at a company called Good Machine. And I remembered once I was doing some poetry films and some of them were narrative little stories, I was like, ooh, this is fun to do this. But I never
Yeah.
did a short, which was straight like master, close up, close. So once I did that, it was like, wow, the next challenge is narrative features, which I
Yeah.
like, but I still like the other stuff. And the goal now is to merge that with the little more impressionistic side. So doing a redo of Going All the Way is a chance to take my first movie, which was kind of uneven that I wasn't necessarily in love with, and redo it and put 25 years of filmmaking experience applying it to that story.
Yeah. I mean, well, and I want to, I'm gonna get to going all the way a little bit, but I wanted to ask you and go back to like with your music video making. What I absolutely love when I look at like your filmography and your career is that is well, first of all, you sort of get a massive hit, a music video that I remember during my teenage years as clear as day in Pearl Jam's Jeremy, where it was just this controversial at the time. It was viewed as a controversial music video where I think there was like a debate on MTV whether they should show it or maybe they showed it in their like late night hours. Um,
No, they
because
just they censored it.
yeah, like it was they yeah, exactly. They like actually were like this is a awful message for kids, but or whatever like people were
But
against.
just to be clear, their censorship of it is what made the message unclear. He kills himself, but by censoring that, it appeared that he shot the kids. So the
Right.
misinterpretation for years was like, oh, it promotes gun violence. And it's like, it didn't. They censored the gun in the mouth. So years later, when it would come out in the uncensored version, it was clear what the story was. It was
Right.
MTV's censoring of it that created this, controversy.
Yeah, well, I mean, but and sort of talk about like making music videos because like you still continued at it, you still continue at it today, even though it's sort of a form of medium that's sadly has like disappeared in ways. But with YouTube, obviously, it helps that there's access for YouTube. But um, you know, going along with that form of filmmaking, that form of storytelling, even were you just like, oh, I don't care that people are going to stop maybe not playing it on MTV. You're going to keep doing it because it's sort of has it always been a form that's inspired you and been a passion for you?
Yeah, I love music. I love subconscious. I love visuals. I love, the freedom. And I've made like these very ambitious music films, like take a 4-minute song and stretch it out and have Imagine Dragons do some original score and take the stems and really let the format breathe out.
Yeah,
The music business has changed.
yeah,
The respect for the medium has changed. The pop music, rap. So if it's all Lizzo and Taylor Swift and Billie Eilish and Drake and that ilk of music, which is fine,
yep,
and the directors that interpret that, now they tend to be more like kind of commercials. Yeah, there's ideas in there, but there's less ambitious narrative
yeah,
that goes on. And some people do it, like Taylor Swift makes some, but it's fewer and farther between. I think the medium itself, as it was tied to MTV, is on. I think when MTV did and took the music out of music television, the form of music videos changed and is less impactful.
right,
And I don't think it's as respected as it was. People still like them, people still want to make them, but as a um, as a decentralized like YouTube, I mean, the internet just changed everything, right? So there's no central place. Yeah, they're
right,
on YouTube. Well, there's a gajillion things on YouTube, but MTV was
right,
about okay, here's a channel for it, for videos, curated for
yeah,
videos. I want to watch music videos
yeah,
and I want to watch the best ones, and they're on there. And that was that. So when that became dissipated,
yeah,
it's like going to a bookstore, but suddenly they sell books and they sell toilet paper and everything. It's like, well, is it a bookstore anymore?
right,
Right. And so wrong analogy because books are still very vital, but I think music videos, like what's content and when anybody could take a song and go make something for it, like, is that a music video?
yeah,
Right. What does that mean? Like, is the artist have to be artist sanctioned for it? So I think the history of the form is still being written, you
yeah,
know, but in it, it would be like, it was this thing of MTV, and then it's just kind of like, what is it? Filmmakers will still make it. Certainly the budgets have gotten reduced, but even record companies, like, what is a record company anymore? Like, just artists can put out their own music and they control their own image, but putting out something that's like, Janelle Monáe, a 40-minute thing. And I've made some 50-minute music films for certain artists, and I love it.
Yeah.
So I think the marriage of visuals and music is great. But I think it's just, it's changed, like everything's changed.
Right. Well, and it feels like it needs to be harnessed more and appreciated more, or maybe put some sense of exclusivity on things of that nature, where people are like, the only way you can see it is in a certain way, to change it and get it back to almost even a little bit of that MTV format. Because as you said, I still think it has a very great purpose to it, and it sort of shows artists in ways that we don't see them enough.
Yeah, I don't think anything can ever go back to the way it was, right?
Yeah.
Because the ability it was exclusive back then, let's say in the 90s, the internet was nothing.
Yep.
There was no smartphones.
Right.
So literally this changed everything, right?
Right.
I remember writing a treatment for a video that was going to be like 4 screens. It's going to be 2
Right.
phone.
Yeah.
We're doing a video for U2, and Bono was like, let's just make it my face, because in the future, faces, right?
Yep.
Sure enough, this is the medium of that intimacy. So it's just, again, attention spans, disposability, that's why they're presentational and catchy. Do you get their attention right away?
Yeah.
So, and it's also, it's too dark, escape, like we can't have dark issues or stuff where, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who have opinions about a lot of things in art and television and film. And there are no hunches anymore.
Right.
Because it's predictive, algorithmic, usually, choices.
Yeah. Well, and you talked about a little bit about going back. I mean, so and this sort of leads me to talking about going all the way. I mean, the reviews were relatively great. You won a production design award at Sundance. But what brought you to this? How long was this in the making for the idea to like retool this and add more to the runtime? Just talk about getting into it, how you wanted to go back and sort of put your own new view
boredom. In. It was boredom and COVID. It was like COVID and nothing was happening. And I was in my office in the deep back storage area, and I was going through tapes, and I found this tape. It was the editor's assembly of Going All the Way on tape, right?
Yeah.
And it was 3.5 hours, and I converted it to a drive and watched it with the editor. I said, wow, we talked about it, and we talked about like, boy, what we didn't like and how it had changed. And so he goes, look, I got some time. Let me mess around with it. So we took 20 minutes out of the cut that it existed, put 55 minutes back in, and generally got to the shape of what this is out there now.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, so you do that. And like Soderbergh recuts movies, and you recut, like, all right, he did it. And I was like, huh. And then a company, make a long story short, a company had the rights to a lot of old Lakeshore, who had made the movie, their material. And I said, guys, you have a movie that never got to streaming or cable or TV. It had a very abbreviated ancillary life. We might be able to make some money for it.
Yeah.
Sure enough, they said it was a good idea. And then I heard about Oscilloscope that was making these 90s movies, redoing them and like revising them. So I said, would you be interested in a new cut of that? Let's sell a new cut as opposed to just, the old one.
Right.
So we came up with an agreement and like kind of a very low budget, kind of a way to do it. And it took about a year from saying, let's do it, to completion, and going through and finding all the old film and searching through boxes and, through a lot of people's dedication, added a new score, new voiceover, new color correction, new titles, and kind of just said, let's revisit this and do a director's edit. Because it wasn't like the old movie didn't get taken away from me. But in retrospect, I don't think my love of the novel and the vision of what it was was as strong then 25 years ago as it is now. And that's just
Right.
25 years of filmmaking experience, and Leo Trombetta, the editor, his amazing vision and ability to kind of take one thing and make the new version of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I well, and I have to make a confession. I have not seen the original cut. I watched this cut, and it was the first time I was seeing your movie. So for me, it was well, one, I loved the film, and it felt like I was seeing the right version, or at least the version that you would have envisioned, which I loved. And for me, I kind of have been really reflecting a lot on Ben Affleck's career and like looking at him as an actor. And it's a really interesting sort of focal point, this movie, when he made it, because he had finished Dazed and Confused. He had done a little bit of Mallrats, and then he had like Chasing Amy coming up with him. But I feel like this movie kind of got glossed over in a little bit of a way. So when you look back at where he was in his acting career, do you sort of view this film as like a major step for him in terms of like a maturity level?
Absolutely. And even though it was glossed over, not within the industry, the
Yeah,
people that saw it, I mean, the calls I got from like David Geffen and different people were like, Ben's a star. And
yeah,
then right after this, he got, I think it was Pearl Harbor, Armageddon, one of those two.
right.
And like, they capped his teeth, and he's a leading man.
Yeah,
I mean, all of his charisma and affability and confidence, yet likability, is all in this movie. And
right.
people knew it when they saw it. And it was definitely regarded with Chasing Amy as like, this guy can carry a movie and be a star and is likable and a leading man. And very much, I can't, you know, chasing him now to get him to watch it is, you know, it's like getting through to the president, you know what I mean? Just
Right.
because of it. But like, I really, my dream is that one day he gets to see it, you
Yeah.
know, um, and just look at all the great work that he did that wasn't seen before. And if you watch the original, you'll be like, okay, yeah, it's the same, but you'll just notice a little bit of you'll just be like, oh, that's interesting. There's who's that character? But you'll just notice that, like, wait, where's the beard? And the entire beard sequence isn't in the first film.
Wow.
And wait, where's them when they go out, when they leave after he tries to kill himself? Like, where's that phone call to Ben? Where's the quarry? Not in there. It was in the Sundance cut, but in the final version,
Yeah.
these are things that are just like, oh, it's better, shorter. And, you know, it wasn't done kicking and screaming over my dead body. But, you know, by that point, you're like, the vague memory of like, I already wanted to move on. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think that begs to sort of ask I'm assuming, I don't want to assume too much, but I would assume a lot of directors either feel like they would love to do this, or some people say don't touch it at all, it's perfect how it is. But I often find, I'm a huge fan of Blade Runner and the final cut of Blade Runner. I often find that it's rare where the director goes back and cuts it and they do get it exactly right. And I feel like when you're just saying that those parts are not in the original version, I would have not loved this movie as much as I did without those parts, because like the quarry scene is like a very emotional, really just honest and earnest moment between two people. Without it,
Yeah.
it's missing that. Do you
Yeah.
sort
It's
of?
missing it. It's less
Yeah,
complete. And it's less complete to the book. And the book was they meet in a train and he leaves at the end.
yeah,
The first version of the movie, you just kind of like it's like you skipped some big pages of the book, or
right,
you reread the first 50 pages over and over again, and we kind of jumped. Now again, the movie doesn't have every scene from the book. This version of the movie has is complete, is a more complete version of the arc of the novel,
yeah,
and as opposed to, like so it's a little funnier, it's a little more hormonal here. And again, that's just from experience of like you shoot a 135-page script. You shouldn't be surprised that your first assembly is 3 hours long. That's
Right.
It's always that way. But you're like, you usually can be like, get that thing. But when you have to lift an entire 30 minutes, 25-minute sequence out to get close to time, there's just choices you make,
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, and I look, you talked a little bit about the novel, and I look at sort of this movie. What's really fascinating about it, and what speaks a lot to it in general, as just as you getting it made, is that a lot of this subject matter feels very current. It felt so timeless about masculinity and men sort of learning to sort of let go of their high school machismo and be their own selves. That feels like something that's so relevant today, that people have to work
Yeah,
on,
watching
right?
it last night, and Ben's going to the thing. He goes, we're really horseshit. It's really a horseshit culture, and like trying to climb on top of the other guy, and it's literally he could be talking about social media, right?
Yeah,
He could really be talking about like comparing yourself to other people, and trying to outdo the other guy, and like the dog eat dog kind of consumer culture in a
right.
way. So post World War II, the 50s was a very affluent time, right?
Right.
So, and these guys were confused about what they were supposed to do as
Yeah.
men, as careerists. Like New York, they had this dream that they wanted to do something different, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they just were questioning life, which is really a universal thing. I
Right.
mean, now it's just all it is anxiety, but it's like, am I going to get my college loans?
Right.
They had the GI Bill. The GI Bill paid for people to go to college,
Yeah.
right? They took
Yeah.
people who'd been in the military and said, we're going to pay for you to go to college and figure out what you want to do.
Yeah.
Getting the new homes. Like this was really the birth of the American dream was born in the 50s. That
Right.
affluence through the 50s, which started to get questioned in the 60s. And like, wait a second, maybe we're not so sure about this thing. But the
Right.
1950s were a incredible time in history. And now people are interested in like 90s and 2000 nostalgia.
Yeah.
It's like the 50s, which is ironic to me that this company that's putting out this film, they're all under 40. They're like 30 years old, 32 years old. The girl who
Right.
cut the trailer was like, but they love the movie.
Yeah.
They're treating it like a new movie. They're like, we don't care about the old movie. This is a new story. And that's what's so interesting. Is like I was watching it last night. It's like, wow, do people make movies set in the 50s now? Like, even if you watch Don't Worry, Darling, right?
Yeah.
And you look at like the trailer for that, and it's beautiful, same costume designer as our movie,
Yeah.
but it's kind of like it looks like the new music video version of the 50s, right?
Right.
Whereas
Right.
ours was really pure 50s in Indianapolis. The wallpaper, it was authentic. Like I was like, I want people to believe they're in 1954.
Yeah.
Not this kind of thing where there's some period clothes, but the production, the camera work is all, I said, I want it to feel like Rebel Without a Cause. So it's like
Right.
simple.
Remove the gloss.
Yeah, and it's very stripped down. It's
Yeah.
very stripped down, as you say, earnest.
Yeah.
Like it's more like Hoosiers now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And I was gonna say, it speaks to your cast too, because pretty much all of them became stars in their own variety of
pretty
ways.
much
Yeah, and an
even Nick
Oscar winner.
Offerman. It was his first movie.
Right, right. Joliet native Nick Offerman. I love that. So I'm gonna wrap up soon, but I wanted to ask you, like, have you had a little bit of time to reflect on this and sort of look at that film and think about uh, who that director was then versus who you are now when you're watching this movie? Do you see a kid? Do you see
Oh,
a kid?
look, I remember every moment of every shot, right? And I
Yeah,
look at like say the car at night going through the rain, right? I'm like, no budget, one shot. Can we get a one rain bar? Now I'd be like, oh shit, I'd have car to car, and even with smaller cameras, I could what I could do with that one rain bar now. But it was like then it was like such a big deal to have the car come through the road,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or so every shot, poor man's process, and I'm like, boy, okay, don't show too much because poor man's process is usually every shot, like, oh god, the lens is a little too wide here. Like, oh wow, I really love the simplicity of that scene. Like them in the car after they have sex and they're in the car. Oh, is she gonna be? Is that what I am? And they never look at each other, but the cameras are here. I don't go cover it. It's one camera.
Yeah.
Now, if I had two cameras and cover it, like no, like there was a simplicity to it that I really appreciate, and like one shot, like so I obviously had some confidence in the actors to be like, well, you can't cut away to like, oh, there's cutaways of Ben looking at the picture so you can tighten it up. That's all you would have done maybe to give yourself a little more flexibility in the edit room is if you hadn't shot so many pages, maybe you would have a couple of other shots to be able to, help tell the story. Like when Jeremy is on this couch with Rose McGowan and he's like, well, I want to sleep with you. I'm like, God, I just wish I had one take of both of them kind of a little closer.
Right.
Not to compress, right, of time,
Yeah.
but just like to feel her connection to him, her incredulity, her incredulousness of it.
Yeah.
By watching it as simple, I go watch, art films now, more European films, and they're like one shot, simple, camera doesn't move, let
Yeah.
it unfold. So I'm like, wow, was I letting it unfold earlier and then later you engineer stuff? Every movie is different, So I learn a lot by looking at those choices then.
Yeah, well, I think too, I'm a huge Ridley Scott fan. A lot of people know that. I've heard how he uses like 7 to 8 cameras at once, and he likes to create it like it's almost like a stage for his actors to sort of act on. And I think although that can be fantastic, I don't think you get your sort of, like you said, the rawness, the sort of natural feeling that you probably felt when you first made this movie.
Well, no, and I could have. Part of it was like the DP was a new DP only a week and a half before shooting,
Yeah.
and I think the woman that was gonna shoot it, we had talked a lot more. The style would have been a lot more. There probably would have been more handheld in it. It would have been a little more lyrical.
Yeah.
And Bobby, who shot it, was a more of a purist.
Yeah.
Like really put the camera down. So I think it was a result of that. And I was like, okay, well, I trust that. And I was enamored by just the actor saying the words from the book. I was like, that's cool. You know what I mean? Like I then could focus on the characters and the story. And it wasn't like, oh, let me do this and all the machinations of it. You know what I mean? All the camera work. The camera work was secondary to the storytelling. And
Yeah.
sometimes the style is primary, but that's usually that you don't trust you lose trust in the performance of the script.
Yeah.
You got to prop it up with something more expressionistic.
Yeah. All right. Well, Mark Pellington, thank you so much for talking with me today. Fantastic movie. Fantastic. I'm so glad you got to get this done. I hope so many people get to see it and in some ways discover it for the first time. Going all the
It'll
way.
be on Blu-ray soon if people still buy Blu-rays, and it'll be and
Yeah.
they're still figuring out who's going to stream it and all that stuff. It's like it's but if they're just keep an eye out for it, and yeah, be really super. And it was really nice talking to you.
Very nice talking to you. Thank you, Mark. We'll talk next
Thanks,
time.
pal.